Most important issue. So
And
what
just
are
take about a minute each. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, a minute. Did you want me to address what we can start doing, or save that for the end?
No, save that for the end.
Okay. So most important issue for me, and what I talk about most often in terms of environment, is storm water management. We're going to continue to face this problem. It's something that can devastate our local economy if we don't get ahead of the curve on it. We see what happens with bad urban planning in these southern cities who have not gotten ahead of the curve and are having flooding, and it just devastates them. And you know, a storm like what we saw in Texas is going to devastate no matter what. But better urban planning would have mitigated a lot of the problems that they had. And so for me, you know, so much of what's important in legislation is to balance the needs of everyone, and economy is always first on the list. And if we don't deal with stormwater drainage and stormwater issues in that part of our infrastructure, the effects on our economy as we continue to see rising sea levels is going to be really more severe than it has to be. And so for me, that's a very practical, pragmatic step that I would like to take in working towards having more of the state funds that are already set aside continue to come down to the localities so that they can make the progress that they need to on that infrastructure change.
Thank you very much. Mike?
Thank you all so very much for having me here. It was a real honor and privilege to be able to spend the evening with you. So in terms of priorities, my first and foremost priority is always going to be protecting victims of domestic and sexual violence. It's what I spend my career as a prosecutor doing, and what I'm going to continue to do up in Richmond. I actually passed a bill on that this past session. In terms of environmental issues, one of the things that's most important to me is affecting the issues of climate change and making sure that we remediate for it. Our friends who will be representing parts of Hampton will remember that in 2015 they passed an anti-wake law. That's so your car won't make a wake through the water when you're driving down the street. And into somebody else's house. The fact that that had to be a law at all is terrifying. And the reason is because we're already seeing the effects of global climate change on a daily basis throughout our community. We need to be able to stop thinking in the relation to just us in Newport News, or just us in James City County, or just in Hampton. There needs to be regional collaboration throughout the peninsula. One of our, all of our great friends and mentors, John Miller, actually was able to pass the first piece of legislation to allow for regional cooperation on environmental issues. We need to do more to be able to make sure that that occurs, so that the same sort of zoning regulations that you're passing in Hampton are going to be mimicked in Newport News, to make sure that everyone throughout the peninsula is doing the right thing. And so I think that there's going to be movement over the course of the next General Assembly session to call for more regional cooperation. Because if we don't speak with one voice, that we are one peninsula and one group of people all affected by the rising sea levels, then we're going to be a fractured voice without any real endpoint in sight. So thank you all very much for having me here. It's been a real honor and privilege to be able to spend the evening with you.
Well, thank you very much.
I would say, based on my experience volunteering with Sierra Club and League of Conservation Voters, I would say the biggest goal I would have in the General Assembly would be stopping greedy companies from dumb ideas like uranium mining and fracking and offshore drilling. And these are all real battles that I've been through, and they all have something in common, which is taking public assets and our environment and our natural resources and turning them in to private profit. And I'll never forget with the uranium mining fight, I mean, these were companies coming in from Canada. These were multinational companies trying to come into Virginia and get a hold of land to do a really dangerous type of mining that they right now only do in the desert in Australia and in very barren parts of Canada. And it was just outrageous to me that they would think it would be okay to do uranium mining, 100 miles from Washington, D.C. and all of the big population centers of Virginia. So it happens a lot in Richmond. It happens. people come along with these great ideas for how they're going to make money, and it will damage our environment. And you want people up there who are going to hold them accountable and shout about it, and you build coalitions and network and make sure that we don't allow them to come in. And I have one more connection to that, which is these 3 Ps, these public-private partnerships. We have to worry about those as well, because a lot of times the company has a profit motive to build a new road, where maybe the public doesn't really need a new road. And there are 3 Ps happening all over the state, and I think we really need to look at that legislation that allows public-private partnerships. I think the legislation right now, it's not transparent enough, and they can do a lot of deals behind closed doors. So I would say protecting the people from these huge corporations with very expensive, very powerful lawyers that frankly, you know, we don't have those kind of lawyers in working for the city or even working for the state. So we've got to be vigilant, and we've got to make sure that they don't destroy our natural resources in Virginia.
Shelley.
6 years in the General Assembly, and the most substantial piece of legislation that my opponent has passed was that no wake zone. So, just so you know. People over profits. The reason I'm running is because I think that corporations have too much influence on the General Assembly and in state government. Shelley talked about the privatization of the public commons. They privatize the profits, they subsidize the losses. Look at the coal industry, bankrupting themselves, dumping the pensions and the environmental cleanup on the taxpayer, while they give millions of dollars in executive performance bonuses to their CEOs. We need to eliminate not only Dominion, but other corporate advantages over the General Assembly. They need to be able to lobby on the strength of their ideas, not on the size of their contribution checks. And so campaign finance reform is going to be very important. I know it's very wonky to talk about and not very exciting, but I think the Virginia way as it stands today is broken. And the main reason that I got involved really was the Medicaid expansion. You know, we have the GOP in Richmond is basically spiting 400,000 people in Virginia because they don't want to give Democrats a win, or they don't like Obama, or whatever you want to call it. The Medicaid expansion, fight for minimum wage. I was a Sanders delegate. That's who brought me into the Democratic Party, basically. I've always been a liberal or progressive, or whatever you want to call it. But you know, people talk about demean democratic socialism or whatever. We've had corporate socialism in this country for the past 40 years. And so everything that I'm going to do as a public official is going to be to swing that pendulum back the other way, give power back to the people. And that's why our campaign is sworn off corporate donations, and that's why I'm going to pledge to do that as long as I remain in office. Thank you.